By the way, if you can hear that banging and if you can hear music, my husband's a personal trainer and he's training someone downstairs. So that's what that sound and noise is. Sorry, that's life, right? It's been a pretty dicey couple of weeks and I've been trying really hard to keep my emotional well-being levels 7 out of 10 or higher. But for the last 2 weeks, things have slipped, and I mean slipped, and really dropped. I was probably down to probably 4s and 3s out of 10. Day after day after day, and it was pretty rough going there. And you're probably asking yourself, well, how did I recover? And how did I recover? You know, actually, how I recovered was I was still pretty stressed, and I went to work and I had a whole bunch of jobs that's, you know, on my list of everything I had to get done, and then one at a time they just disappeared. Like, people weren't able to make it, or they called in and said, can they reschedule another time? And actually one full day just opened up. My boss was supposed to come see me and work with me for 2 hours and wasn't able to. And a few things like that just happened, and the whole day opened up. And I tell you what, talk about fix my well-being. In that one foul swoop, just having the load off for one day actually really helped. So maybe that's a tip for you, for a professional. If your days are always booked out solid, then maybe what you can do is make sure that you schedule a day where you don't have meetings with people and you don't schedule a whole bunch of things in the day that you actually have to do and get done, because the mental burden of knowing that you've got to do all that is probably not very good for your emotional well-being. So that's a tip. Now, I've also come up with something completely different, because what I was finding is everyone's got their to-do list, and the to-do list, you know, it can be 50 items long and it just never ends, and that in itself is an enormous drain. So what I actually realised one day in my freaked out state, I remembered that when I was at school, and I went through a really tough time when I was in year 11 and I nearly dropped out of school because of it. As it turns out, I was actually incredibly depressed. I had moved from my family in Sydney, and we were about to move to Lismore, where I had lived before, and I did have friends there, but I just didn't have I didn't feel like I had anybody. I was living with family friends until my family bought a new house for us to move into, but until then I was just utterly miserable, and even for months after, and it was horrible. But what I did at the time to help myself, because there was not one single person on the planet that helped me, because nobody asked if I was okay, it was just horrible, crying myself to sleep every night. I came up with this thing, and I don't even know where I got it from. I wrote down all my subjects and things I had to do, and I had a must-do column, and a should-do column, and a could-do column. And then I would sort of divide it up about what I had to do that day. In the end, I figured out I'm just going to do what I've got to do today and not think about the next day, because that was too much. And it occurred to me that when I used this when I was in year 11, and I kept using it through to year 12, this must-do, should-do, could-do list, that really helped me narrow my focus to, I've only got to do this biology assignment this afternoon and do my maths homework. And then once I figured that out, that I could work on those things and only focus on those things, my must-do list, not even think about my should-dos or could-dos, that sort of helped ease the mental burden. So I've come up with this chart. Have a look at it now. I avoid having a to-do list now, and I try to put it all on my calendar, but sometimes I've got all these things coming at me and there's a whole bunch of things I need to do, just like you. You're a professional too. And then they all hold in your head, and you might not have gotten a chance to write them down. Even if you had a to-do list, that to-do list just goes forever, and that in itself is overwhelming. So I've come up with this. This is my must-do, should-do, could-do list, but I've divided it into stuff that I have to do and then things that I could delegate. So I've shown you that, but this is one that's practical. So this afternoon I've sat down and I've written down just some minor things. The other day this whole page was chock-a-block full, and I've made it not too long, because if I make it an A4 sheet, which is a whole sheet, then like that in itself, there's going to be too many things on my must-do list, and that in itself is overwhelming, and I can't allow that. I have to move things off to my should-do or delegate them. So that in itself, and what you will notice in here is for each one I've actually got a priority. Is it priority A, B, C or D? So I can actually prioritise on my must-do list whether something is a priority and something that I absolutely have to focus on first, second, third. And that, just writing that down ready, and then I can schedule those things in my calendar, just writing those things down separately, knowing, oh thank God, I only have to focus on my must-dos for the moment, scheduling those and getting those done, and I can schedule in the should-dos and could-dos as well if I get a chance to. That has helped massively. Now the other thing in there, I've always also written in there how many minutes how many minutes is it going to take me to do. Now you can see I haven't filled this out, because in and of itself, if I write down, oh that's only going to take 5 minutes to do, or 2 minutes to send that email, then just it eases the burden, and that improves your emotional well-being. Now my mission is to improve my well-being and keep my emotional energy levels 7 out of 10 or higher, even with a full-time job as a high school principal, which is never easy. And so what I'm going to do for my list that I have here at the moment, I'm just going to circle the priorities and how many minutes they're going to take. But to be frank with you, normally I need to do that when I'm stressed about it, because I have got so much to do and not enough time. So it's the process of doing that that actually helps. But at the moment, I'm actually an 8 or even 9 out of 10, which is incredible. If you knew what I was like over the last 2 weeks, you could have said, Shelley, you look bloody awful. And I did. I looked awful because I was really, really suffering. Too much on my plate, doing way too much, working way too many hours. One night I actually worked till 11:30 p.m. after our swimming carnival, because there was something that I had to do and get done, and I just was never going to be able to enjoy my weekend until I did that, but I just didn't recover. So that was a long day, from 7:15 in the morning till 11:30 p.m. all at work. That is not actually how you're supposed to live your life. I chose to do that so I could get that work done and get that finished and finalised as best I could, so that I just could focus on my other work for the rest of the time. Anyway, I'm going to do that now and I'll come back to you. So what that means is that when I go to now schedule that into my Outlook calendar, I know that I have to allow more time for that. The other thing I have figured out but I haven't done yet, I'll have to keep you posted whether it works, but what I plan to do is every day make sure that I have at least an hour and a half of gaps. Because I'm a high school principal, things come from left, right and centre, and everything hits the fan, and you've got to deal with and manage things as they arise. And without having an hour and a half gap, or even 2 hours of gaps in the day, then I don't get the work done that I planned anyway. So if I at least schedule in my gaps, then I have to stress less when I'm at work and when everything hits, because I know that I have scheduled in time to manoeuvre things if that happens. The other thing I forgot to mention, you're going to think I'm a total dag for doing this, but at one of the schools that I worked at, they actually did this in order to create sort of little booklets for things, for just like a tear-off sheet that they used in the office, and I used it the other day. So I actually came up with this chart that I've already told you my must-do, should-do, could-dos, and I actually printed them, cut it off, and then I put it in a stack, put something on top of it, and I literally just used shoe glue all along the edge. So now I've got a tear-off booklet, so for myself to use, so it's all contained and succinct, and you know, it's not just piles of paper sort of thing. So I find that really handy for when I want to use one of my charts, is to actually put them together and make it into a tear-off booklet, rather than having them in plastic sleeves or anything like that. I don't know why, there's just something about that. You can grab the booklet and write straight on it rather than having to get things out. It helps my well-being. I'm one of those like stationery nerds who used to love the news agency and still do. Shh, don't tell anyone. Yep, do what works for your well-being, right?